Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Parkinson's Foundation Expert Briefings. I'm Dr. James Beck, Chief Scientific Officer of the Parkinson's Foundation, and it's a pleasure to have you with us today. In today's briefing, we'll have an in-depth look at the latest advancements in Parkinson's disease research and the emerging treatments. Here, we will cover the current medication pipeline and highlight new therapies and their potential impact on symptom management. Thank you for joining us. But before we begin, I'd like to do as we always do, just get a sense of who's here joining us today. So a poll should have appeared on your screen, and here's an opportunity to let us know your connection to Parkinson's disease. Are you a person with Parkinson's, spouse, partner, healthcare, professional, physician, clinician, you name it on that list? Let's find out who you are as part of the process. And if you're joining us on Facebook Live, you can just put your affiliation with Parkinson's disease, your connection, right there in the comment section is that process. And so we will see where we are. Okay, not surprising. A lot of people with a direct connection to Parkinson's, they living with the disease or their care partners have joined us, as well as some other individuals as well. Welcome everyone to today's expert briefing. So thank you for sharing your connection with Parkinson's disease. Before we begin our formal briefing, I'd just like to take a moment to introduce the Parkinson's Foundation. Parkinson's Foundation is a nonprofit organization. We're dedicated to improving the lives of those living with Parkinson's by enhancing care and advancing research. Our efforts are deeply rooted in collaboration with the Parkinson's community, as you'll see today, and ensuring that everything we do aligns with your needs and priorities. And today's program, as I said, is an example of how we're working with you to meet those goals. The Parkinson's Foundation has invested over $440 million in research and care to improve the diagnosis and treatment and push scientific breakthroughs forward. And one of our key initiatives is here, PD Generation. PD Generation is an opportunity to have free genetic testing and counseling if you live with Parkinson's disease. And by participating, you can learn about your genetic connection to Parkinson's and contribute to the research effort that's underway in order to better understand the genetic architecture of the disease and hopefully drive new treatments and one day a cure. So we encourage you to share this opportunity with your community if you've already done it. And I believe together we can make a difference in Parkinson's disease. Just a reminder that we are recording this expert briefing, so there's no need to worry that if you've missed something, you'll be able to watch it again. And by registering, we will send you an email to give you information when that link is available so you can watch it again and share it with others who may have missed what I think will be a fantastic expert briefing. I also like to highlight that we are our PD Health at Home series is presented by the Light of Day Foundation, whose generosity has made this programming possible. So I'd like to extend our thanks to the Light of Day. And also thanks to our expert briefing sponsor today, BioV Pharmaceuticals. For more information on their clinical trials, you can scan that QR code on the screen and then pick up some information about their trial to see if that's of interest to you. So next, I'd like to welcome Dr. Kevin McFarthing as our speaker today. He originally trained as a PhD biochemist, and he held leadership roles in research and development across life sciences, diagnostics, and consumer healthcare businesses with companies that include Amersham, Serono, and Reckitt. He currently serves as joint editor of the clinical trial highlights section in the Journal of Parkinson's Disease, and is a member of the research committee at Cure Parkinson's, a nonprofit based in the UK. He's also the lead author of an annual review on the clinical trial pipeline in Parkinson's, and with the most recent update published in 2024. Dr. McFarthing curates the Parkinson's Hope List, which is an online global database of therapies in research and clinical development, and chairs the Patient and Public Involvement Group for the Edmund J. Safra Accelerating Clinical Trials Program. Dr. McFarthing was diagnosed with Parkinson's in 2022 at age 55, and he brings both a professional expertise and personal insight into his work in this field. So please please join me in welcoming Dr. Kevin McFarthing. Dr. McFarthing?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can
Jim?
hear you.
Good. Right. I'm delighted to be here to talk about advances in Parkinson's research and treatment. Many thanks to Jim and Krista for the invitation. I'll start with some disclosures, not any. And just to clarify what we're trying to do today. I hope to deliver some insights into some breakthroughs in Parkinson's research, learning about upcoming medications and the potential impact on managing your symptoms, talk about emerging therapies and the potential influence on patient care and quality of life, and finding out how to participate in clinical trials. The way I'll do that is to provide some context to the research and development activities in Parkinson's, talk about some options for symptom relief, some options for disease-modifying therapies, and finally, talk about some new trial designs that are coming down the pipeline to increase throughput of agents in clinical trials.
Dr. McFarthing, would you share your slides for us, please?
Oh, sorry, I thought it was.
It happens. There they are. Thank you so much for sharing.
So I'll just skip back a bit. Learning objectives, gaining insights into Parkinson's research and promoting new treatments, learning about new medications coming through down the track, see how emerging therapies could influence care and quality of life, and how to participate in clinical trials. So as I mentioned, this is the agenda. They'll aim to meet those learning objectives. First of all, it's important to be clear that nothing I say today is intended to be medical advice or any kind of recommendation. If you are inspired to do something to help manage your own Parkinson's, please don't do anything without consulting the appropriate healthcare professional. Jim's already been through this background. I'll just add one thing. I was diagnosed at 4 p.m. on the 10th of December 2012. I think like many people, I remember the day and the time and context, the neurologist who did it as well. Right. It's a tough game trying to develop drugs for the central nervous system. The Tufts Center for the Study of Drug Development in Boston did a study in 2019, which showed that to get one drug out of the end of the pipeline, you need to put $2.6 billion in. That doesn't mean to say it costs $2.6 billion per medicine. It's just you have to start off with a very large number of potential medicines, and they whittle down through the various stages of research and whittle down through the various stages of clinical trials. But it costs $2.6 billion for the failures as well. It takes longer than average compared to other disease indications. It's less likely to succeed. It takes longer to get regulatory approval. And the FDA priority review is offered much less often. So in that context, you could imagine that pharmaceutical companies are not interested in Parkinson's. However, there are some characteristics to the Parkinson's market and world that make it more interesting. So the prevalence is increasing. These are figures from 2018 from Ray Dorsey and Baz Bloom. And a recent paper looking in more detail predicted that by 2050, there would be 25 million people around the world living with Parkinson's. It's a chronic condition. It's not like a throat infection where you could take 2 weeks worth of antibiotics and you're cured. Because for Parkinson's, there is currently no cure, which means there's a big opportunity for the people who deliver that cure. I put cure in inverted commas because that means different things to different people. We probably all have our own individual views of what a cure might mean. It could be anything from a magic bullet that resolves all symptoms and restores our abilities back to where we were before it started. I think that's highly unlikely. But for somebody who might be approaching the end of their life, if there's a drug that gives them another 10 years of symptom-free life, and they continue to live a natural course. That could be assumed to be a cure as well. So there's a full spectrum of potential meaning by the word cure. Each year, a company called Pharma Projects, who are part of the Sightline Group, do a study on the state of the pharmaceutical research and development world. And they look at the top 25 diseases or indications that are being targeted. And we find Parkinson's at number 16, which is a respectable position. But 15 of the 25 indications are cancer, 3 are COVID. So if you take those out, because they dominate, Parkinson's is at number 3, behind type 2 diabetes and Alzheimer's, ahead of rheumatoid arthritis, ahead of obesity. So that's a pretty respectable position to be in. I started doing my own assembly of what was going on in the R&D world for Parkinson's in about 2013, 2014. A couple of years after diagnosed, looking to produce my own list. It started with a simple Excel list, then it expanded and expanded, and it reached something that's called the Parkinson's Hope List. And that has a list of 355 projects, both for symptom relief and for disease modifying. I put down there at least, because those are the ones that I've been able to find. There are probably more out there that I haven't found yet, and new ones arise almost every week. That's in the research stage, from trying to discover molecules all the way through to clinical phase 3, where people are trying to get the last piece of data before applying for registration. The other thing to mention here is that the 355 projects all being funded by somebody. So not only is there a massive amount of work going on, there's a phenomenal amount of investment going into Parkinson's research and development. From the majority of those 355 are commercial entities. And when we think about the purpose of these potential therapies, they're either going to relieve symptoms, slow down the progress of the disease, stop the progress of the disease, or renew what's been lost. And the last 3 are what's called disease modifying, because almost exclusively they're trying to modify the underlying biology of Parkinson's to stop the bad things happening and hopefully get some good things happening with the biology. And when we look at how to split the numbers, there's 102 projects looking to relieve symptoms, and 253 looking to modify the course of the disease. The renew angle is a tough one, because one school of thought would say, once it's gone, it's gone. You can't get it back. And I think that's probably most likely. But there are other ways that quality of life can be improved, and some functionality restored. This is a summary. I won't go into it in great detail, but this is how the data is cut. So on the research side, we can find out what's in the discovery and preclinical. On the clinical side, we can see which phase projects in. Both research and clinical, we can look at whether the target of the project is symptom relief or to modify disease. We can also look at whether something is a new chemical or biological entity, whether it's reformulation of an existing active, for example, turning levodopa into a nasal spray. Repurposing, which is where you take an existing drug that's being used for a different indication, and apply it to the treatment of Parkinson's. And it's interesting to note of the 153 projects in clinical phase, 47, almost a third, are looking to repurpose existing molecules. Then we have cells and gene therapy. Also, each year for the past 5 years, together with some colleagues from the US and the UK, we've written a review of the therapies in the clinical trial pipeline. There's a US government website called clinicaltrials.gov, which acts as the database for almost every clinical trial that's going. So you have to register it with clinicaltrials.gov. And that's a fantastic database to analyze active trials. So Sue's involved, Sue Buff is involved with this because her husband has Parkinson's. Gary and Ken have Parkinson's as well. Brian's from the Michael J. Fox Foundation, and the rest of the team is from Cure Parkinson's. So that we usually end up with about 136, 140 active trials ongoing. And this paper is also open access, so anybody can go along and read it. And you can look at the different categories, targets that the clinical trials are aimed at, and lots of interesting information and data in that publication. Let's look at some things that are going on to relieve symptoms. This is the Parkinson's iceberg, which some of you may be familiar with. It splits what people see, such as tremor, rigidity, gait problems, slowness of movement, with what people don't see: constipation, panic, lots of smell, hallucinations, depression, pain, bladder problems. Parkinson's affects each of us in many different ways. I'm sure you've heard the phrase, if you see one person with Parkinson's, you've seen one person with Parkinson's. It's the heterogeneous nature of the disease that makes it challenging to actually do studies on the disease. So what we're finding now is that a lot of projects are being started looking at specific symptoms, rather than saying there's some levodopa and that's your medicine, or it's exclusively dopaminergic with dopamine agonists and apomorphine treatments like that. So looking at different targets. So let's first of all just give you some numbers. As you can see, the biggest one is still general symptom relief, primarily dopaminergic. And also the numbers of specific symptom relief projects are approaching the number of general symptom relief projects. So to give you an example of some of the things that are going on, just taking some of the projects that are in process for targeting dyskinesia. In Poland, Salon Pharma's CPL36 has just done a very impressive phase 2. Also, IR Lab in Sweden have mesdopetam, which is a dopamine receptor antagonist as opposed to agonist. And that's also successfully passed phase 2 with good efficacy and good tolerance. Vistagen are targeting the NMDA system for a variety of symptoms, including dyskinesia. The thing that strikes me about these three is that they're all looking at different biological targets. So not just dopaminergic, not just serotonin, but phosphodiesterase inhibitor, dopamine D3 antagonist, and then NMDA. All different routes to the same objective, which is to relieve the symptoms of dyskinesia. And looking further ahead, Sinopia Bio, based in Chicago, have a preclinical candidate for dyskinesia, which they're aiming to get into clinical trials fairly soon. Now, many of us experience dyskinesia and wearing off periods. But it all comes back to the therapeutic window for levodopa. When we start taking levodopa with mild symptoms, then the therapeutic window is wide. So you can take levodopa, the level goes up in the blood, it comes down again. And it's only at the very top or the very bottom we might experience unwelcome symptoms. As the disease progresses, this therapeutic window narrows, primarily due to the underlying neurodegeneration and progressive nature of the disease. So that you get more time with potential dyskinesia, more time with potential off, and that gets worse as time progresses. What we need is a lesson from Goldilocks. So if you go through the therapeutic window, always trying to keep in the middle. So you do not too much, not too little, but just right. And this is the principle that's being used for the launch of a new product called Vyalev, also known as Produodopa in Europe. This is a very smart piece of work by AbbVie, because one of the problems previously with levodopa pumps, and the concept is not original, and it's not Nobel Prize winning, but the dosages of levodopa that we tend to take, and carbidopa as well, are such that the volume you need to deliver under the skin will be very large. What AbbVie found is by using the phosphate substituted levodopa, so levodopa with the phosphate group attached, that is much more soluble than standard carbidopa and levodopa. So they're able to use much less volume, but still use the same ingredients. And it's got a smart device which has a pump inside with a syringe, slowly delivering through the tube underneath the skin. And this is a snapshot of some of the levels in the blood. So the y-axis is the concentration of levodopa, and on the x-axis you have time. So here you see the standard oral carbidopa levodopa going up and down, and here is the Vyalev, the levodopa, taking a lesson from Goldilocks. Not too much, not too little, just right. And this chart is from a paper from Ray Chowdhury's group. Hang on. It's from Ray Chowdhury's group in King's College London. They wrote a paper published last year on the new AbbVie Vyalev product, and they found good on decreased off periods. The efficacy was maintained over the 52 weeks of the study. Improved nocturia, so that's not getting up in night to go to the bathroom as much. Improved freezing of gait. Monotherapy in approximately 30% of people, so that 30% of people on Vyalev weren't taking any other Parkinson's medicines. Decreased troublesome dyskinesia, improved sleep, and decreased early morning off period. It's not without its problems, because some people find skin reactions at the injection sites. That has to be watched very closely. Now, tavapadon is a dopamine agonist, which acts on 2 of the 5 dopamine receptors. They're aiming to reduce common side effects, for example, impulse control disorders that are associated with dopamine agonists, and also to deliver better efficacy than the existing agonists. So they've done very well in the phase 3 studies. We've done 3 successful trials, one with a fixed dose therapy on its own, second with a flexible dosing regime, but just on its own, and thirdly, in addition to levodopa. And the results from all of them showed good tolerance, good efficacy, and adverse events were low or moderate. And they have an extension phase 3 underway. So hopefully they'll be submitting a dossier to the FDA this year. It's an interesting story because Cerevel, the company who developed this, were formed out of a merger between Pfizer's neuroscience intellectual property and Bain Capital. They put about $400 million into this joint venture. And last year, AbbVie paid $7 billion to acquire Cerevel and its clinical pipeline, which includes tavapadon. So from a situation where people were very disappointed and sad that Pfizer were pulling out of neuroscience, to a situation where a potentially new symptom relieving drug is on the way. Stem cells. It's a tough game to do studies in stem cells because each data point involves brain surgery. And it takes time for the effect on symptoms to become apparent following the implantation of cells. The results have been quite variable. And despite the work from people like Aspen, the Transuro study, and others, but we haven't yet gone beyond phase 2 with cell replacement therapy until now. Blue Rock Therapeutics, or a subsidiary of Bayer, have recently completed the phase 1/2 trial, primarily looking at safety, and I think we've got 17 people. And the new therapy called bemdaneprocel has just, towards the end of last year, been approved as a regenerative medicine advanced therapy by the FDA. And they're allowing Blue Rock to go directly to phase 3, which they plan to do with about 80 people. So this will be very exciting. First phase 3 for cell therapy, and good numbers as well. So let's move to stopping or slowing progression. This is the Gila monster. And it's the start of an interesting story on GLP-1 agonists. The Gila monster, by the way, lives in southwestern United States. The bad news is it's venomous to humans. The good news is its maximum speed is 1 mile per hour. So even with Parkinson's, we should be able to escape them. But 20 odd years ago now, a molecule called exendin-4 was discovered in the saliva of the Gila monster. This acted to with properties like glucagon, which is important in diabetes. And since then, they've grown massively. So Wegovy, Ozempic, names that you might see appearing in the news, are GLP-1 agonists. GLP stands for glucagon-like peptide. So they've made a big splash in diabetes and obesity, but they've also been very interesting in Parkinson's, because to cut a long story short, they are neuroprotective. They protect nerves from damage, and that's what we desperately need. So one of the GLP-1 agonists, lixisenatide, was studied in the trial in France, which published last year. And this was about 80 people per group with 12 months worth of treatment. And the primary measure was something called UPDRS, Unified Parkinson's Disease Rating Scale. Part 3, which is the motor examination. And this is a summary of the results. Moving to the left is improvement. Moving to the right is getting worse. And the difference between placebo and lixisenatide was about 3 points, which is similar to the decline that we would expect in normal life. So the placebo is declining, similar to how patients would have declined anyway. But lixisenatide barely moved, which is very encouraging. Then there was a phase 3 for exenatide, one of the earlier GLP-1 agonists, done in London, which was 2 years worth of treatment with UPDRS part 3, again being the key measure. And this was building on a successful phase 2 and some good preclinical work led by Tom Faltney in UCL in London. And we were expecting more than we got, because what happened was this: placebo and exenatide, very similar outcome. In all of the sub-studies as well, there's no difference. There's some other GLP-1 agonist trials. Liraglutide, 42 people in the active group and 21 in placebo. No difference in the motor symptoms, but there's a significant improvement in some key non-motor symptoms. Neurally had a modified exenatide. Two groups, active and placebo, no difference in placebo. The 2 studies still to report. One's an imaging study in Stockholm in Sweden, and the other one is semaglutide, which is Wegovy and Ozempic. One theory behind why exenatide didn't work is that it's an earlier GLP-1 agonist with not as high an affinity for the receptor as semaglutide has. And that will tell us something when the results come out. So this is a classic example of the development of drugs. You win some, you lose some. Doesn't mean to say that GLP-1 agonists are dead. Far from it. If I'm looking back to the development of levodopa in the 1960s, some of the trials done on levodopa were also negative. But we all know today how effective that drug is. Gene therapy. If you can't deliver a molecule to the right part of the brain without complicated plumbing, the one option you have is to deliver a gene, which will then produce the protein that you want to have. So GDNF, or glial cell-derived neurotrophic factor, has been the subject of a lot of study over the years. And now AskBio, also a subsidiary of Bayer, are looking to deliver gene therapy with gene coding for GDNF. That's in phase 1 at the moment. Some other disease modifying prospects. Inflammation is one of the key things that goes wrong in Parkinson's. And a key checkpoint in the process of inflammation is the construction of the inflammasome. And the NLRP3 is a molecule that's a key part of the inflammasome. So inhibiting that is a very interesting target. And there's been, over the last 2 years, about 7 NLRP3 inhibitors entering clinical trials at the early stage, phase 1, and even more being lined up in preclinical. GBA and LRRK2 are genes that are strongly associated with Parkinson's. So people with variants in these genes can produce the wrong kind of LRRK2 or GCase, which is GCase is the enzyme produced by GBA. And what we need to do with GCase is to increase the activity of GCase, because that declined. And with LRRK2, we want to inhibit the activity, because that gets too active. And not only has GBA and LRRK2 genes taught us an awful lot about the biology of Parkinson's, they're also interesting targets for potential therapies. We'll go into a bit more detail of those in a couple of slides' time. Alpha-synuclein is widely thought to be the baddie, the key baddie in Parkinson's. Although there's a theory that the loss of soluble alpha-synuclein is the problem. Most people think targeting alpha-synuclein aggregation is of great interest. This is not just trying to remove alpha-synuclein that's already aggregated and is blocking up nerves, but preventing that aggregation happening in the first place. So there's a lot of effort focused on alpha-synuclein. Nicotinamide riboside is it's a molecule that's precursor molecule for nicotinamide adenine dinucleotide, NAD, which is a cofactor in many different biochemical reactions in the body. And it's felt that by boosting NAD, which can decrease, and making sure that NAD levels, particularly in mitochondria, are normal, that could actually help to slow or stop the progress of Parkinson's. And there's an interesting trial underway in Norway on nicotinamide riboside. Growth factors, proteins that help or stimulate nerves to grow. I've already mentioned GDNF. CDNF is cerebral dopamine neurotrophic factor. BDNF is brain-derived neurotrophic factor. And there's a lot of work going on, particularly in Finland, on the potential of these molecules as disease-modifying therapies. So this is just a simple list of the companies that are working on GBA targets and LRRK2 targets. GBA and LRRK2 together probably account for between 10 and 15% of Parkinson's cases, with the rest of them being either small genetic variants like pink and Parkin, or idiopathic, which is what the majority of us have. And there are 7 trials going on Broxol I'll tell you more about amboxol in a few slides' time. So there's a lot going on with the genetic target, genetic rationale. Two potential therapies that have been going for some time now, with a lot of effort going into them. Prasinezumab is an antibody against alpha-synuclein. It's gone through 2 phase 2 studies now, and neither one did it meet its primary objective. But there are signals in the data that Roche believe are positive, and so they're carrying on with the project. Buntanetap from Anovis Bio reduces the production of alpha-synuclein, and it did a phase 3 study which didn't meet its primary objective. But again, Anovis believe there are signals in the data that mean they want to carry on trying to dissect out the reasons for success or failure, and revisit the clinical development of buntanetap. But we have a challenge in phase 3. And this is a diagram from the Journal of Parkinson's Disease paper I mentioned earlier. I won't be testing you on your memory for all of these drug agents, but so let me make one point. The white line going across the middle separates disease-modifying therapies on the top and symptomatic relief therapies on the bottom. Then within each half, you have a pizza slice of phase 1 studies, a pizza slice of phase 2, and a very narrow phase 3 slice, which includes exenatide and a small project on lactobacillus. So phase 3 is the last stage before a company applied to the FDA for approval. And as you can see, we have a dearth of phase 3 disease-modifying therapies in the pipeline at the moment. So we need the phase 2 ones to rapidly get through, hopefully be successful in phase 2 and get into phase 3. So the big challenge there with phase 3. Which leads me to ways to address that challenge. Edmund J. Safra was a US financier who died with Parkinson's and left behind a tremendous legacy of investment in new initiatives for Parkinson's. So as well as funding research, the Edmund J. Safra Foundation fund clinical fellows, and a variety of other ways to enhance the life of people with Parkinson's. And they funded an initiative to design a new way of doing clinical trial, which is the EJS ACT-PD, ACT being Accelerating Clinical Trials in Parkinson's Disease. So as Jim mentioned, I chair the public and patient inclusion and engagement team within the project. Now, the standard way of doing clinical trials is to go through the phases 1, 2, and 3, one after the other, in a serial way. Test one active against one placebo, build infrastructure, including people, and dismantle it once the trial is finished. When it comes to the next phase, it's rinse and repeat. Unless you have lots of money, you end up with long gaps between phases. Now, the MAMS way of doing it, MAMS meaning multi-arm, multi-stage, is once you know that a drug is safe enough to go into people, you start with a phase 3 design. You don't start with phase 2. But you have interim reviews, meaning that any arms that aren't showing efficacy can be stopped. You test more than one active against a single placebo. and keep the infrastructure because you'll have a queue of drugs waiting to be tested. So the design would look something like this. Start with placebo, go through year 1, year 2, year 3, year 4, that doesn't change. Treatment 1, in this theoretical scenario, treatment 1 passes the interim review there, carries on, passes the interim review there, and is reviewed at the end of 5 years, the phase 3 interim. The treatment time for the EJS Act PD is 3 years. It takes time to recruit enough people and then to analyze the data. So that's why we think it'll be 5 years. Meanwhile, treatment 2 didn't pass the interim analysis because there was no sign of efficacy. Treatment 3, likewise. So you create 2 spaces there, which can be filled by treatment 4 and treatment 5. And again, they didn't work either. So treatment 6 then comes in and is looking good. And treatment 7, likewise, fails. We expect to get more failures than successes because of the nature of what we're trying to do. But we believe that something will come out of this. Part of the reason why we're quite confident about this is that the 3 MAMS studies for multiple sclerosis, prostate cancer, and motor neuron disease, also known as amyotrophic lateral sclerosis or ALS, have all produced successful additions to their medicines armory using this MAMS study design. So there are 3 active drugs starting off. Telmisartan, which is used to treat high blood pressure. Tretinoin, which is used to treat enlarged prostates. And UDCA, which is used for a liver disease called primary biliary cirrhosis. And so we're expecting 400 patients per arm, 1,600 in total. And the first one of those are expected to be taking the drugs by early summer. There are some other Parkinson's MAMS studies underway as well. The Hydra trial for phase 3 target in Norway. And the other Norwegian trial is Sleipnir, which is aiming to be a triage center for phase 2 studies before accelerating them to phase 3. There's a French version being developed. The Australian Parkinson mission have already evaluated 3 drugs in the Australian Parkinson mission part 1. They're now also planning a phase 2 with 3 more drugs to be tested. Interestingly, in the second phase, they're looking to test a combination, which is a different thing. And the P2P trial in the US is the path to prevention. Ambroxol, which I mentioned before, and Ambroxol is one of the drugs being used in the combination for the Australian Parkinson's mission part 2. There is doxycycline, an antibiotic. It's been used as a cough medicine for many years now in Central Europe, Germany, Poland, Belgium, and the screen of over 1,500 existing molecules found Ambroxol increased the activity of GCase in models of Parkinson's. GCase is the enzyme that's produced by the GBA gene. They did a phase 2, which was funded by Cure Parkinson's, at a much higher dose, 21 tablets. Was shown to increase the activity of GCase in people as well. So phase 3 is about to start. And it's particularly important for people who have that GBA gene variant. Looking at 2 years of treatment, 330 people to be recruited. So, how do you find your study? Clinical trials are nothing without participants, without people with the desire and courage and, and advanced thinking to join in the study. The Parkinson's Foundation have a slot on the website where you can find and join studies, as do Michael J. Fox Foundation, the Fox Trial Finder. I mentioned clinicaltrials.gov earlier. That also is a way of finding out what studies are ongoing. That the clinicaltrials.gov data is packaged into a much more easily readable form by Sue Buff's PD trial tracker. And again, you can see what studies might be going on in your local area. So to summarize, Parkinson's is attractive to drug developers for a variety of reasons. There are promising options for symptom relief and slowing progress. Disease-modifying clinical trials are tough, and we need more phase 3 ones, but new clinical trial designs will improve the output. And with that, thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Dr. McFarthing. I appreciate you sharing that. It was really interesting. And I think it's really great to see the context. That is a question I'm sure you've heard, and I know our audience has thought as well. Why aren't there new therapies that have come to market? And I think it's clear that you have shown it's not for want of trying, that they're not new therapies. And it's really fantastic to see that there's so many who are trying and spending tremendous amounts of funding in order to try to be able to advance them, especially for those which might stop or even halt Parkinson's disease. So I think that's great to see. So thank you for being able to do that and put that in context. Some of the questions that have come through, I think, have been interesting. So when we talk about the different phases of research, phase 1 is that very early stage, really about safety. Sometimes it's with healthy volunteers, sometimes it's with people who have the disease, and then phase 2 is a larger study. I guess in Parkinson's, it could be 100 to 200 or so people. Again, safety is a primary concern, but they're looking for a sense of efficacy. And then that phase 3 study, I think, is really the critical one, where they're really looking to see whether this potential therapy can work or not. And a question that's come through, I think is interesting. I'm just curious your thoughts on it. Why are we seeing so many failures in this phase 3, this last step, whether it's with the FDA or the European counterpart, the EMA, as part of that process? What are your thoughts? I mean, especially as you talked about that GLP-1 study.
Yeah, it's a difficult and frustrating situation. I think one issue is the heterogeneity of Parkinson's, because we're all different. Our Parkinson's might have started in different ways. It might be progressing in different ways. So it's much different to those other diseases who don't have the same level of difference. I think the assessment methods are not ideal either. So UPDRS can have variability. There's potentially ways around it, but that's also an issue. There doesn't seem to be a consensus on the best measure for disease-modifying studies. Also, we still don't know what exactly causes Parkinson's. We've got strong associations with pesticides. We know there's genetic risk, but we don't know what the trigger is to set off the pathology. We don't know whether the pathology is the cause or the consequence of the disease. I think also because it's a relatively slowly progressing disease, it takes a lot of time to open up any difference between placebo and active, and some of the studies really don't give it enough time.
What do you think?
Some of the reasons.
And why do you think they don't give it enough time? I think I think you and I both know, but it's good to articulate it for our audience. What one of those barriers are.
Well, money is one thing.
Yeah,
and there's probably some other reasons which is keeping the infrastructure going for a much longer time is a big challenge. There was, I think, the longest treatment time I can remember is from the Radipine trial, which is done by Penny Simoni in Chicago, and that had a treatment time of 3 years. And also, so there might also be the uncomfortable conclusion that if everything else was right, some of these drugs still wouldn't work. Spacely failure is not unique to Parkinson's.
for sure. And I think that's remains an issue, and I think that's really one of the reasons why we really look to these phase 3 studies to be, as I say, pivotal in our understanding of whether they're going to work or not as part of the process. One of the things I think is interesting is that we talked about these novel dopamine agonists that are going to be coming hopefully to the market, to Vapidon, that you brought up about from AbbVie. Why do you think there's an interest in pursuing these agonists versus conventional levodopa carbidopa? What would a agonist in theory be beneficial for a person with Parkinson's?
I guess it's the same principle that we use to add other adjuncts to levodopa, like entacapone or opicapone,
Hmm.
for example.
Mm-hmm.
It's about extending. It's also a different tool which approaches the receptor in a different way. And I'm fairly pragmatic. So if it helps me live better for longer by relieving symptoms, then I'm interested.
And I think it's also one time a day too, which I think has an advantage over conventional levodopa carbidopa. Even with some of the extended release, you have to take multiple times a day as part of that process. So perhaps maybe that's a different dosing because there's a real burden with having to take oodles of pills on a regular basis as part of the process. So you mentioned the GLP-1 agonists, and we haven't yet seen success on that. And I just came from last week. I was in Vienna for a meeting on Alzheimer's and Parkinson's disease, and so it was interesting to hear some of the original researchers in semaglutide, talking about how they're looking to push that into Alzheimer's disease too. And sometimes we've heard, and this was maybe said in jest, that Alzheimer's and Parkinson's disease are type 3 diabetes. And how that there's always been a hope to be able to apply some of these medications which have been used for type 2 to Parkinson's disease. What do you think it is about these GLP-1 agonists which might actually provide the benefit? Is it something direct in helping with bioenergetics, or do you think it could be inflammation that it could help be reducing as part of its impact on the brain for people with Parkinson's? Do you have any thoughts on that? I don't know if you've been thinking about that.
The risk is this being above my scientific pay grade. I think there's also another potential thing, which I think they reduce the aggregation of alpha-synuclein.
Okay.
So I think there's also glucose intolerant, so in insulin resistance, which is happening in the brain as well. And I think the GLP-1 agonists can help to get over that.
Yeah, I think so too. I'm hopeful that that, as you point out, the latest generation might actually show some effect with people with Parkinson's. And I was really excited to see, and I think it's this other novel class, which are really targeting the NLRP3 medications, which can really target brain inflammation. And hopefully that those we might see some benefit there too, because of just the issues which are occurring in Parkinson's disease as part of the process. I know we're coming up towards the end of the time, but I didn't know if you're listening to the audience, and I think Dr. McFarthing has really put forth, and I think made a strong case that there's a lot of medications which are coming to fruition. They're in clinical trials, but it really depends upon our audience to participate in these trials. And clinicaltrials.gov is one way, our own foundation website, and then again, the Fox Trial Finder. So those are ways. I know that there's several questions have come in about looking to participate in clinical trials and without having to wait for your doctor to advise you on it. So those are good ways with which to do that as part of the process. Dr. McFarthing, I want to thank you for your time today and presenting the expert briefings, the latest advances on Parkinson's research. And I'd like to thank everyone who's joined us today as part of the process. We had a lot of questions come in, and I'm sorry we didn't get a chance to get to them all, but we're doing our best. So if your question wasn't answered, I encourage you to call our helpline at 1-800-4PD-INFO. And what we're expecting to come next in May is an exciting opportunity managing nighttime interruptions in Parkinson's disease, which will be our last expert briefing for the spring. We'll take a hiatus over the summer and begin again in September with Parkinson's Medications 101 as part of the process. Needless to say, I should mention that we have a number of resources which are available to you as part of the process. In addition to our expert briefing today, we have our PD Health at Home with our weekly virtual programs as part of the process, and that's something to consider. There's a QR code. You can just hold your phone up to the screen to register if you're interested, or you can do it the old-fashioned way and type in parkinsons.org/PD Health as part of the process. I'd also like to thank, again, our sponsor, BioV Pharmaceuticals, who have a clinical trial focused on Parkinson's disease. And if you're interested in that, you can, again, pull out your phone or just Google BioV for their website, or go to our Join a Study page where we have a link there as well if you're interested in that potential recruitment opportunity. As always, we're here for you as part of the Parkinson's Foundation, either through our website, our helpline, 1-800-4PD-INFO, or even send an email our way at helpline.parkinsons.org. As this webinar comes to an end, the screen may go black, but what should pop up is a little brief survey. We utilize this information to share with our presenters, to think about internally how we can always improve what we're presenting to our community. So please take a moment to fill out that survey as part of that process. Until then, look forward to talk to you again in May. Take care.